One of the big three problems with the Lakers is LeBron James. LeBron James is not a good basketball player anymore.
That's just
LeBron James defensively is a pure liability now for the Lakers. LeBron James on the court is always a minus. LeBron James is now going through the motions on a basketball court, and the Lakers deserve better. LeBron James is very much aware of and about stats and numbers.
Absolutely not. Wins and losses is all LeBron cares about. Plays the game the right way.
I'm comfortable in every shot I take. I can shoot 0.0% from the three-point line. I believe I'll make the next one. I've been playing ball my whole life, so not much of a numbers guy.
The clip didn't need build-up. It didn't need context. It hit the timeline and instantly sparked arguments across every corner of NBA social media. On live television, sports radio host Craig Carton went straight at a statement made by LeBron James about not being a numbers guy. And instead of brushing it off, Carton completely tore into the idea. No soft disagreement, no polite analysis, just a full-on breakdown questioning how believable that claim really is from one of the most statistically overwhelming players in basketball history. The original comment from LeBron wasn't new in tone. He has often emphasized legacy, winning, and basketball IQ over pure stat obsession. The idea is simple. He focuses on championships, not box scores. But when Craig Carton reacted on air, he didn't just challenge the sentiment, he challenged the reality of it. Because when you're one of the most statistically overwhelming players the league has ever seen, saying you're not a numbers guy opens the door for scrutiny. And Carton walked right through it. LeBron James has all of you losers fooled that he was going to make a major announcement about the pending end of his storied career. And I sat back and I kicked my feet up and I said, you're all being had. Like, even when you know you're being had, you fall into the LeBron trap. It's a marketing deal. Carton's argument was blunt. He pointed out that LeBron's entire career has been built on numbers. Points, assists, rebounds, efficiency, longevity records, and playoff dominance. The idea that someone with that statistical footprint would distance himself from numbers feels, at least to critics, contradictory. And that contradiction is exactly what Carton highlighted on live TV, not disrespectfully, but aggressively enough to spark debate across the basketball world within minutes. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to look at what LeBron's not a numbers guy identity represents. It's not about denying stats exist. It's about framing his career philosophy. He's always positioned himself as someone who values impact over box score accumulation, team success over individual milestones. But the tension comes from the fact that his impact is measured more than almost any athlete in modern sports history. Every season adds another layer of historical comparison, and every performance is immediately translated into statistical context. One of the big three problems with the Lakers is LeBron James, and that comes from J.J. Redick, who said famously over the weekend, "I have no interest in 53 more games like this. Now, maybe you should coach more and be more demanding, but LeBron James is officially now washed." Yeah. And that's where Carton's reaction gained traction. He wasn't just reacting emotionally. He was reacting to the contradiction between message and reality. How can a player who is constantly breaking records, leading all-time lists, and being evaluated through advanced metrics simultaneously claim not to be defined by numbers? That's the question he pushed live on air. And it instantly turned into a broader debate about how athletes frame their legacies. The conversation quickly expanded beyond just LeBron's quote. It became a larger discussion about how modern NBA stars talk about legacy versus performance. In today's league, players are constantly balancing two identities, the statistical identity and the narrative identity. One is built on numbers. The other is built on influence, leadership, and championship success. LeBron has always leaned heavily into the narrative side, but the numbers have never stopped following him. LeBron James doesn't give a rat's ass about Lakers basketball. LeBron James is not a good basketball player anymore. LeBron James defensively is a pure liability now for the Lakers. Like, every LeBron James wants the ball, but he doesn't deserve the ball. LeBron James on the court is always a minus. LeBron James is now going through the motions on a basketball court, and the Lakers deserve better. Laker fans deserve better. And here's the part nobody is talking about. The reason this debate even exists is because LeBron James has reached a level where numbers are no longer just statistics, they are history markers. Every point he scores pushes him further into all-time records. Every assist changes where he sits in all-time rankings. At a certain point, you stop being a player accumulating stats and become a reference point for future generations. That's the space LeBron occupies right now, and that's why his statements about numbers feel so heavily analyzed. Craig Carton's criticism also reflects something deeper about sports media today. Debate culture thrives on contradiction. When an athlete says something that doesn't perfectly align with their statistical reality, it becomes fuel for discussion. And LeBron, because of his status, generates more of that fuel than almost anyone in sports history. Carton didn't invent the debate. He amplified a tension that already existed in how fans interpret LeBron's self-description. But the reaction wasn't one-sided. Supporters of LeBron pushed back immediately. They argued that saying "I'm not a numbers guy" doesn't mean ignoring statistics. It means prioritizing winning and leadership over personal milestones. In that interpretation, LeBron isn't rejecting numbers. He's rejecting being defined solely by them. And when you look at his career choices, that argument holds weight. From team decisions to late career adaptations, LeBron has consistently emphasized team success narratives over individual stat chasing. Still, Craig Carton's point resonates with critics because of LeBron's unique position in NBA history. Very few players have had their entire career documented through numbers the way LeBron has. From early career dominance to longevity records, his statistical presence is constant. Even his leadership and impact are often explained using advanced analytics. That makes the "not a numbers guy" framing sound to some listeners like a disconnect between image and reality. The debate escalated further when analysts began revisiting LeBron's most iconic statistical milestones. Scoring titles, playoff runs, finals performances, and longevity records all came back into the conversation. And each one reinforced Carton's underlying point that LeBron's greatness is inseparable from numbers, whether he likes it or not. Even legacy arguments around him are built on measurable achievements. At the same time, this is where the conversation becomes more complex because reducing LeBron to just numbers misses the broader impact he has had on the game. Leadership, adaptability, basketball IQ, and cultural influence are not easily quantified. They exist in the space between statistics. That's the space LeBron is often trying to emphasize when he speaks about legacy over numbers. Here's where it gets dangerous, because when media narratives start locking athletes into contradictions, every statement becomes a debate trigger instead of a philosophical perspective. LeBron's attempt to separate himself from statistical obsession gets interpreted as denial of reality, while critics like Carton use that framing to question authenticity. The truth is both perspectives are partially correct, but the media environment rewards conflict more than nuance. The timing of Carton's comments also matters in the broader context of LeBron's career. At this stage, every statement he makes is filtered through legacy analysis. Fans are no longer just watching performances. They're evaluating historical placement. Is he the greatest ever? Where does he rank all time? How do his numbers compare to other legends? That constant comparison makes it nearly impossible for him to separate identity from statistics. LeBron's "not a numbers guy" philosophy also reflects something deeper about athlete psychology. Many elite players prefer to frame their success in terms of impact rather than metrics because it allows for emotional and contextual interpretation. Winning a championship feels more meaningful than scoring a certain number of points. Leading a team through adversity feels more important than hitting a statistical milestone. That's the mindset LeBron often expresses. But Craig Carton's critique exposes the friction between that mindset and public perception, because the audience doesn't experience games emotionally the way players do. They experience them through data, highlights, and historical comparisons. So when a player as statistically dominant as LeBron downplays numbers, it creates cognitive tension for fans and analysts. The reaction across social media reflected that divide. Some users agreed with Carton, saying LeBron's statement doesn't match his statistical legacy. Others defended LeBron, saying greatness should never be reduced to box scores alone. And in the middle of that debate sits the reality of modern sports media, where meaning is constantly shaped by both numbers and narrative. What makes this discussion even more layered is how LeBron's career itself evolved through statistics. Early in his career, he was defined by potential metrics, efficiency, usage, and all-around impact. Mid-career, he became defined by dominance metrics, MVPs, finals appearances, and scoring consistency. Late career, he is defined by longevity metrics, age-defying production, records, and sustained excellence. At every stage, numbers were central to how his greatness was understood. And yet, LeBron continues to emphasize something beyond that framework. He often talks about leadership, team success, and long-term impact on the game. That's where the philosophical disconnect emerges. Carton's reaction doesn't reject LeBron's greatness. It questions whether you can separate a player from the very thing that defines how greatness is measured. Here's the part nobody is talking about. The reason this debate went viral so fast is because it hits the core tension of modern sports culture. Athletes want narrative control, but fans demand statistical clarity. LeBron is trying to define himself through impact, while the media constantly translates that impact into numbers. That friction is unavoidable when you're arguably the most documented player in basketball history. As the discussion continues, it becomes clear that this isn't really about Craig Carton versus LeBron James. It's about how modern sports legacies are built. Are players defined by what they say about themselves, or by what their numbers prove over time? In LeBron's case, the answer has always been both. But Carton's reaction forces people to question whether those two identities can truly coexist without contradiction. And that's why this moment didn't fade quickly, because it's not just a hot take. It's a reflection of how basketball culture processes greatness in real time. Every quote becomes analysis. Every analysis becomes debate. And every debate eventually circles back to the same question. Can a player whose career is defined by numbers ever truly say they aren't a numbers guy without sparking a conversation that challenges the very foundation of their legacy?